Sitting, thinking at first glance and first thought. Ready by 21 seems to me you're ready by 21. But actually, the equity, opportunity, and readiness of it resonate further than the surface. So let me pull away the curtains because I'm certain of each. Equity, you see, is the hardest of the bunch because nobody likes to give what they got in hoping to give the little ones a nudge, fearing that the little ones will rise too much, making them less important, less significant, feeling less of a person. This fear, however, is natural. That's why equity is scarce in this world, and that's actually factual. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes said, "We are born selfish. That's why if we selfish, it's for our own gain, not so that the little ones get the same, and that's when the little ones do the same." To think upon it, equity is needed at certain places. Communism tried equity, and their people were in chains, and they pondered the thought when the government would stop frame them. That's false equity. Giving the little ones that boost, knowing that in the end they would still lose because the bigger gain was split in two, given to the higher crew. Equity is not equality, and equality is not equity. The political system is that equality or equity. The educational system is that equality or equity. The economic system is that equality or equity. Because I saw children coming from better homes getting more opportunities because they were born on top. But that's my next thought, opportunity. I told them problems are opportunities in disguise. Opportunities do come and pass by. Ask why to yourself and see if you had some opportunities. In a sense, they are the true equity. Because no matter what, each opportunity is the same. It just depends on how we maintain the cause and adjust the frame so that we gain from the opportunity. Knowledge, money, power, status, individuality. There is something. A poor man and a rich man can be side by side and see the same fence, but the person that decides to look over that fence for themselves is the one that gains. Notice it's all the same. See, these factors run deeper than the surface. Dig a little deeper and the pressure becomes more urgent. The purpose overall in doing this is that you see the core stretched long and become more sure that you are ready by 21. Thank you.
My maternal grandmother was born in Gonaïve, Haiti, in the small platform where every door faced the middle of the courtyard. Every Friday afternoon, they would come to the center of the platform and share their educational discoveries of the week. My grandmother said every child was equipped with a foundation that would provide equal success no matter what career path they chose. Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in an interview said, and I quote, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself up by his own bootstraps, but it's cruel to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself up by his own bootstraps. In other words, you have the boxes, use the boxes to lift yourself up and hid the boxes, but the clocks of time will never fail." Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "Health cannot be a question of income. It is a fundamental human right." Yet policies say that your rights can be taken away because of your misfortune. What do these three people have in common? They all understand that with success comes equitable opportunity, understanding that nothing can be handed on a silver platter. They had to find the silver, mine the silver, and serve themselves what their country did not. My teacher covered inequity with subtopics like income, education, wealth, health, gender, religion, and the justice system. And the root of the problem was it is psychologically ingrained. Our teacher, Miss Erica Walsh, then asked, "What are the solutions?" We pondered, how could we find a solution to a problem that is embedded into the American history, a country who didn't think of the possibilities of cultural differences, a country who believes that gender equity, religious equity, racial equity, and sexual equity is something that can wait? Nelson Mandela, 1938, started his equality and equity protest. Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., 1965, a peaceful protest, and we're still advocating for what should come so naturally. May your journey to equity and equality be one for the history books. Keep the future in mind and remember that life is a complicated gym membership that you cannot cancel, so work it out.
Wow, wow, wow.
That was not all that good. Why do you guys do that to these young folks? Give them standards. You don't think so? It was highly individualistic. I wrote things. For ourselves and about ourselves.
All right. Wow. Wow. Oh, man, what a great way to center our minds and heart on what's going to be a rich conversation on pursuing equity and healing. Can we give Kiela Wilburn and Keanu Hewitt, seniors at Palm Beach Lakes High School, another round of applause? I'm Sara Matthew. I'm a program manager at the Forum for Youth Investment. I support our Opportunity Youth work and our work around racial and social equity. And now I have the amazing pleasure of absorbing some sage advice, some wisdom, and learning stories from three strong and compassionate young leaders who will be joining us on stage shortly, and from the incredible Ruby Nail Sales. I'll just give you a little snippet of her bio. Ruby Nail Sales travels the country preaching and teaching. She answered the call to social justice as a teenager at Tuskegee Institute, where she joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and worked on voter registration in Loudoun County, Alabama. Ruby has a Master's of Divinity, is the founder and director of Spirit House, which is focused on community organizing and spiritually based community building. She is one of 50 African Americans to be spotlighted in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and so much more. Ruby, thank you so much for being here with us. Can everyone join me in welcoming Ruby Sales? So this morning, Karen laid a really strong foundation around data of the odds that our children and young people are facing. And I'm excited to bookend this day with this, just a conversation with Ruby and three young leaders who will join us shortly. And really, this conversation is just gonna get to the heart of it, right? Which we often don't talk about, the deeper questions around humanity and spirituality, questions around who lives do and don't matter, ideals around self-interrogation, questions of asking ourselves the hard questions, the important questions of who are we, who are our communities, and what is this country that we live in. And to do that with Ruby, I just must say that I am truly honored. I watched a bunch of videos and read up on you, and I just feel overwhelmed and excited to be here and have a conversation with you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for being willing to be in conversation with me. What an honor to have this conversation with you today. Also, I'd like to thank Karen and all of the hands that made this day come into being. It is an opportunity for us to gather together as a community in a fragmented and individualistic society to deepen our conversation about the meaning of equity, democracy, and justice in a capitalist technocracy where very few lives matter. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of Black mothers, sons, and daughters is as important as the killing of white mothers, sons, and daughters, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I've thought a great deal about how might we begin this conversation, this encounter with each other this afternoon in a society that oftentimes render us mute, small, and invisible. What are the questions that bind us together despite our particularities? Let us begin with the universal questions that bind us all together in this country today, in this place, and at this particular time in history. And I submit to you that there are two important questions, and perhaps I should shut up and let you ask me those questions. The first important question is the efficacy of all human lives and all human bodies in a society that commodifies, dehumanizes, vilifies, degrades our lives and our bodies, whether that's through gun violence, whether that's through the prison industrial complex, whether that's through the immigration complex. We are all fighting to be large in a society that renders us small and objectifies the meaning and the depths of our lives. That's the first question. The second question is, how might we create a collective agenda that moves us forward as a community while at the same time recognizing our particular issues? In other words, how do we harmonize the I with the we? And how do we forge a movement that is rich with hindsight, insight, foresight, which is whole sight?
We can get some snaps for that. So Ruby,
Yes.
you were doing at 16.
Yes.
You were a freshman in Tuskegee, 17 in the thick of the Southern Freedom Movement, also known as the Civil Rights Movement. You grew up in a very strong youth culture that was dominated by activism. Can you talk a little bit about that and how does that compare to today?
Well, I grew up in the counterculture of education in Columbus, Georgia, that was a long train running towards excellence. And despite there in the glare of segregation, right there in the glare of a public school system that meant for us to be deficient human beings, our parents, our teachers, and our principals pooled their resources and created outstanding students, dedicated parents, compassionate activists who we did not see a separation between our careers and the needs of the community. So this was a strong counterculture that from the time I was growing up as a child, we understood that there were things that we needed to do in order to advance the race. So I never saw myself as standing outside of a community. I never saw myself as being someone separate from the needs of the community. And so it was this kind of spirit that had been inculcated in me all the way from childhood that stimulated my activism at Tuskegee. And so I went to Tuskegee actually thinking that I would be a beatnik and that I would be a writer who would then do some amazing things for the community. And so I was really hanging out, sort of doing a whole lot of nothing at Tuskegee, but trying to be a beatnik.
Can you describe what a beatnik is for us young folks?
They were the hip poets of the 1950s, and they went around, yeah, hey baby, yeah. They were the hip people of that generation. And I wanted to be, and so I was hanging out at the pond at Tuskegee, drinking Catawba Pink and swimming in the local pond, trying to be cool, when I got a new religion, and that religion was the movement. And I was part of a generation of young people who we did not exist because of ourselves. We came from a long project that a community had carefully tilled, generations of young people, for the day of the Jubilee, for the day when we would fight for our freedom. And they kept doing this generation after generation when there was no evidence that their work would bear fruit. But they kept on tilling generations. So my generation was the culmination of that work. And I joined the SNCC, went into Lowndes County, which was called Bloody Lowndes County. You have to understand, I was naive. I didn't really understand what a movement was. I didn't really understand what I was getting into. I was just wanted to have my freedom. That's all I understood in a very cognitive sense. I did not understand that we were about to enter into one of the bloodiest wars of the modern times. I did not understand when I went into Lowndes County that I was entering into a historical space that was called Bloody Lowndes, where black people had been murdered for generations by white vigilantes and police in that county. And so going into Lowndes County, I became involved with local black people in that county who were moving forward a civil rights agenda. And I was not the leader. They were the leaders. They were the authentic leaders. And I was not coming in to organize them because they were already organized. They were not empty-handed and empty vessels that I was coming in to fill up with all of my elitist knowledge. And so it was in that movement that I understood the value of local people and what they bring in the cultural resources that they had developed over generations for survival. And so as a young person, I think what was significant is that I was grounded in community and part of an intergenerational movement. Even when I disagreed with older people, I still understood that I had a connection to them. And more significantly, I had roots in that community. And we were a part of a common vision and a common struggle. And I think that's what was very significant, a common project that we were all engaged in. Now, we had a common vision, but we had different ideas of how we would get there, right? We had different roads on the highway, but nonetheless, it was a common vision. And we were not building leaders, exceptional people, individuals. We were building a liberated and exceptional people. And that's really important.
Could you tease out a little bit more about the intergenerational connection? So with SNCC and then the Southern Christian Leadership Council, talk a little bit about that relationship.
Well, I think that as an African-American young person growing up in the segregated South, we understood that we were like our parents and other black people, that we bore the stigma and the marks of blackness, and that we did not separate ourselves out from our parents and our community. To have a generational disagreement is not the same thing as separating yourself out from each other. Generations should disagree with each other in order to stretch the conversation a little bit deeper and a little bit further. But that's very different than disconnecting yourself from each other as generations. So I think that part of how Black people have survived in the face of the most brutal system of oppression in the South was through our intergenerational connections and the fact that we understood that we were all in this project together. And I had fantastic teachers at Carver High School. They were absolutely devoted and incredible. And they understood that each of us as students brought something to the project that was valuable. Some people were gifted in terms of scholarship, other people were gifted in terms of crafts, other people were creative artists, other people could play sports, but each of us had value in the project, and nobody was unessential or small.
I love that. I love how you talked about Southern Black teachers and the Black church and Black folk religion had armed you and prepared you for what you would have faced in Loudon's. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or is there anything more that you would say about that armor?
Well, I think that I wouldn't call it armor more than grounding. I think that Martin Luther King made it very clear that we were not wanting to integrate into a burning house. And he saw America as a house on fire. If the house had not been on fire, there would not have been a need for the civil rights movement. And so the question was, what is it that we were trying to do in that movement? And we understood that movement was more than about getting a job. It was more than just about getting a college degree. Because if those were the things that we were after, we were just going to create a new elite, move from one elite to another elite. So the question was a spiritual question of changing our consciousness, changing our relationship to each other, God, and all aspects of creation. So Martin Luther King's movement was first and foremost a movement to raise our consciousness in terms, and he understood that if we could change who we were on the inside, it would impact what we created on the outside. And he understood that if we could look at each other and see each other as being significant and essential in the eyes of God and in a project of democracy, then that would be a major transformation in the way that we lived and worked among each other. So I think that when we think that we're just after a material world, without understanding that the good life is not just about a job, that the good life is not just about power, that the good life is not just about individual success, that there's another part of human existence, and that's the spiritual side. That's where our history abides, that's where our consciousness abides, that's where our faith abides, that's where our hope abides. And those things, that aspect of human existence is just as important as the material aspect. And particularly in the world that we live in today, that's a very critical question in a capitalist technocracy where only 1% of people matter in the society. It is particularly significant today in a capitalist technocracy where robots and artificial intelligence are replacing a human labor force. So what does that mean for young people in a world where more and more the possibility of getting jobs and competing with robots? What does that mean? What is the future? How do we move forward to prepare young people to contest a thing-oriented society and a computerized society where their value to the society grows less and less and less? How do we tell them the truth about the meaning of that and prepare them not to move forward with despair, but to move forward with a clear collective plan with hope and optimism to know that no lie lives forever, that truth crushed to the ground shall rise again, and that they will have a say-so in the future. But we can only do that when we have them to understand the world that they're living in today, that many young people go to militarized public schools armed with AK-47 weapons, grenade launch pads. Many young folks do not have public spaces together that are safe, that are educational, that provide them with an opportunity to live into their fullest capacity, because the society, people in charge of this society have spent the last 40 years making sure that there will never be a youth culture as profoundly powerful as the youth culture was in the 60s and 70s. And part of that reaction was to destroy public spaces where young people could gather with each other in order to get to know each other, in order to develop not only intimacy with each other, but also intimacy with with the older generation, so that we are faced today with the question of how do we build a strong youth community in a fragmented world where oftentimes young people search for roots.
What you just said is very interesting to me, because you often talk about counterculture, and I feel like we use that word almost as if it's a bad word or a negative word. Could you talk a little bit more about the importance of a counterculture in the society
that found themselves up against an oppressive empire, part of how they survived was to create a culture that gave them the elasticity and the room and the cultural resources in order to reaffirm their humanities, and so that they would survive and thrive without becoming broken-winged birds. And that's what a counterculture is, and countercultures are replete with language, with symbols, with a folk music, a folk culture. And so I think that it is important that we understand when we talk about healing, people have been healing themselves ever since they were enslaved, ever since this country committed genocide. People have survived through the cultural and spiritual resources that they developed that enabled them to survive. So that there's not one society that has been up against the whip of oppression is empty and devoid of cultural resources that are essential and can be used for their survival today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
You also talk about this younger generation needing to find a new language for freedom. And so I'm interested in hearing a little more about that, and particularly around the language of privilege. We talk about allyship a lot, white privilege, LGBTQIA plus allyship. Talk about that allyship and privilege versus companion.
Excellent. Well, I think that when you say that you are an ally or you stand in solidarity with someone, basically what you're saying is that you're helping them out in their struggle, that the struggle is really not yours, that it's something that you're doing for someone else, when in fact racism is a spiritual death, social death, and spiritual malformation that impacts all of our lives. Whiteness is not a privilege. It is a social death that separates us not only from each other, but also from the love of God. It is a death-driven system that creates militarism, that creates segregated communities, that create people who are afraid to live with other people, that make people live into very small and rigid spaces. That's only a privilege if you believe that material power is everything. But if you understand the largeness of human existence, that there's no privilege to live in such a small, fearful space, riddled with anger, and being afraid to live next door to someone who looks different than who you are. That's not a privilege. because God intends for us to live into the fullness of humanity. So while on the one hand we can say that some people have more economic resources than others, I would say that some people have more spiritual resources than others, and that that's privileged, and that they are privileged too. So I would say, why not have a mutual exchange? If white people can give some of their economic resources, we'll be more than happy to give them some of our spiritual ones.
During a podcast on Being with Krista Tippett that you did, our foreign team listened to that and talked about...
Let me just say something
sure.
about... So I think that what I'm optimistic about is that I hear young people today talking about struggle in a more democratized way. When the Parkland young people talked about what happened at Parkland, they were just not concerned about themselves. Mm-hmm. They were also concerned about the violence that's at the very heart of American society. So that I think that that is very hopeful, and that we have to really begin to talk about each other's struggles as much as we talk about our own. Mm.
So on that podcast, you talked about several powerful themes, but there were a couple that really resonated with our team, and we spent some time grappling with. Karen wrote a blog based on some of the powerful words you shared. And two things. One was that love is not antithetical to being outraged, and that there was two types of anger. Yeah. Could you talk about that?
Well, people who don't want to be called to task for their behavior, for their oppressive behavior, want you to believe that that love means that you can never be angry. I argue that love can create anger, but it's redemptive anger. That the anger and redemptive anger is anger that moves you to change things, moves you to create a better world, moves you to be compassionate about someone else's struggle. That's redemptive anger. Non-redemptive anger is the anger that the guardians of white supremacy, the guardians of misogyny, the guardians of heterosexism, the guardians of classism unleash, that make us fear and are angry at each other and destroy, and leads to vigilante murders, leads to state-sanctioned murders by police of people of color, that leads to mob violence, that leads to militarism. That's unredemptive anger, because it's anger driven by death and not by life.
Mm. All right. So I think now would be a perfect time to invite our young leaders up. Does that sound good with you, Ruby?
Absolutely.
All right.
But I'll just say one thing as they're coming up. As we're thinking about our strugglers and the movements that we're imagining, don't say that we're building anti-racist movements, because anytime you begin with an anti, what you create will be over and against. So could we think about a new language of saying that we're building pro-movements, that we're building a movement not because we're against something, but because we're for something. So I think that we need a redemptive language that provides open doors to everyone, even those who oppress us, to move out of the pitfalls of moral nihilism into a higher consciousness of redemption. Mm.
So now joining us, we have three, as I said, strong, compassionate young leaders. We have Marlene Brajas, 16-year-old at John I in Green Acres. Anybody from Green Acres repping? Okay. We got one fan. We also have Jackson Destine. You are a senior at Atlantic High School in Delray.
Yes, ma'am.
You need up.
I can tell. It's okay.
And Sam Fuentes, you are 18-year-old senior at Douglas High School in Parkland.
Yes.
All right, can we give them all a warm welcome? having you each just share a little bit about your story. Tell us about you, what you like to do, your community, and to a question that Ruby often poses is, where does it hurt? And so maybe you can even frame it in that way of, where are you seeing hurt and healing in your community, in your family, in your schools?
Well, I'd like to start off by thanking everyone here and thank you for this opportunity. I see hurt through the suffering of my family and friends, through the destructive federal immigration laws, and many misconceptions there are about illegal immigrants and immigrants. It can be simple comments on YouTube videos. I've seen many under the DACA. I just scroll down and see the videos, and it's very hurtful to see those comments and those misconceptions everyone has on these immigrants. Also, where I see hurt, I also see healing. I am fortunate enough to be a DACA recipient, and so I've been able to get my learner's permit. I'm able to take dual enrollment courses now, and I like to give back to my community. I'm in HOSA, which is Health Occupation Students of America, NHS, National Honor Society, and I volunteer at the Hotspot program at Green Acres Youth Program.
Great.
Jackson?
I would like to also say thank you for this opportunity, and also thank my Lord and Savior for allowing me to be here with you guys. And me growing up, I grew up in a poverty-stricken environment where the community was just based off of drugs and gangs, and I fell victim to that growing up because I didn't really know any better. You know, I would go to school and do what my uncles were doing, which was, you know, fighting and being in and out of jail. And that was the same thing that I was doing. And I didn't have a father or a mother figure to tell me, like, that was the wrong thing. So as I'm going to school, I would get suspended for doing the wrong thing. And that was my discipline. That was my slap on the wrist. That was that's not the right path to go. So when I was in school, I really liked to stay in school so that I wouldn't be like the rest of my family, you know. And I had a vision, a dream to break the cycle of poverty, to break the cycle of high school dropouts in my family. So no one in my family ever completed the 10th grade. And I just made it a dream for me to complete that. And I am here today as a senior. I have straight A's, 4.0 GPA. I'm not just a senior, but I'm the class president at my school. I am Wendy's High School Heisman, #1 in the nation in high school. I give back to my community. I'm always involved in my community. Now, with my trophy, I speak at various schools to let the kids know that believe in yourself when no one else believes in you, because no one else believed in me. But because I believed in myself, I'm here speaking to them, you know? So don't let nobody tell you can't do nothing. Just chase your dreams. Don't let no obstacle stop you. And with the help of my teachers, I want to give a big shout out to my teacher, Ms. Lewis, who has always been there and supported not just me, but other average kids. And, you know, God, you know, I'm just thankful and just want to keep accomplishing and keep achieving my dream.
We have some really beautiful people up here. I feel so honored to be here. I think hurt exists in silence and in the names of the forgotten. I find that every time you flip on the news or any television station, there's always some kind of reckless act of violence that happened, whether it's a shooting, whether it's been a robbery or an assault. And it happens far too much that weeks will go by and you'll never hear of these people again. You'll never remember their face, you'll never remember their name, and their death becomes a regular occurrence. And I find that hurt exists in those who get neglected, those who are left behind, those who don't have the ability to fight because they're so injured and so beaten down that they can't operate normally. So I think that hurt exists in those who are not being heard, whose voices are not being emphasized, who are not being spoken up against. Because the problem is that, sure, we have these incidents that happen, People are losing their lives every single day, and people do nothing, and that's because no one cares. There's a common theme of indifference in this country, and that seems to be the issue. And the people who are most hurt are the people who are not being listened to, people who are not being heard out, because they themselves are too hurt and injured to speak up, and no one will give them a chance to speak. And I don't want my incident that I went through personally, being shot and having to see my friends and closest, teachers die in front of me. I don't want that incident to be forgotten. I don't want my injuries to be another statistic. I don't want my story just to be another headline. I want it to be a final resolution. I want it so that we can protect everyone everywhere. But that's only going to happen if people are open to the idea, if people listen, if people open their eyes and realize that maybe it's not going to happen to you, but it could. And maybe it doesn't affect you now, but it could. Do you want to be a part of the generation that stops the violence? Or do you want to stand with the people who do nothing? And I think that's a critical question that we have to answer, because indifference is the same as standing on the side of this oppressor. And if you are indifferent, you are just as good as the person who's inflicting that violence. So, and I think healing exists, right? When people come together, when they unite with one another and acknowledge each other's differences, because we're all diverse, we're all different, we're all unique, but there is a common theme, and the common theme is humanity, it's life, it's passion, it's love, and we can all experience those things. So if we come together and come and speak about universal issues and come up with universal solutions, then that'll be just the start of it.
I'm curious, when Ruby and I were talking, were there anything that Ruby shared that resonated or stuck out to you?
Everything. I can't even pinpoint something. Everything was just facts. Everything was just so honest, and everything.
I told that to Ruby. She and I were talking before we came on stage, and I think I just looked at you and I said, you give language and words to things that I feel or know, but I can't quite articulate. And so I feel that too. Yeah.
I'm thinking deeply about the story that you shared, and I really want to say two things about your generation. You must read your generational narrative within a larger context of things that happened in a war on young people of your parents and your uncle's generation, from a system that was determined that they would not survive after the Southern Freedom Movement, and making sure that all of the strongholds of survival that had existed for African Americans that had carried us through for 400 years were destroyed, and those were the family, community, intergenerational connections, and Black folk culture. And so that I think that it is important, even when we look at the things that have been a source of hurt in our lives, that we contextualize our own journey within something larger than ourselves. And that it's not just that that it's important for you to see your rising up as carrying forth the ball that generations of people like you carried in the most adverse circumstances. And if you just see yourself as an individual, you won't have the stamina to run the journey. And so I just think, and I also want to say that your generation has been abandoned in terms of not having community to ground you. And I hope that in the 21st century, it will be a coming home to a community, and that you won't have to say things like self-care. You will be able to say community care.
Yes, ma'am.
So I admire and respect your struggle. And I think that even those people, young people who we think are without hope, I think we need to rethink that, for them to get up in the morning and go to school and to perform and to do all the things that they do when there's no evidence that their hope would bear fruit, but they keep on moving, that we must also acknowledge that they too have hope.
Thank you.
So,
Let me just say something about immigration here. I think that we're in the face of a very critical issue, and that's the whitening of America in the face of a society that's rapidly becoming black and brown for the 21st century. Newt Gingrich warned the country in the 1990s that by the year 2000, this country would be brown and would not be predominantly white. And that created in the hearts of white supremacists a great deal of panic. And they set about to do ethnic cleansing by removing brown people from this country. And as they had done for generations of African Americans, they used the same tactics of criminalization, dehumanization, and slander to make Americans believe that not only were brown people not worthy of being in this country, which actually originally belonged to them, so it's a little bit ironical that you can kick people out of their own country, but at the same time, making Americans feel that brown people from El Salvador, Mexico, are dangerous people, and and that our safety depends on removing them. And African Americans have been through this. That was the same rationale that they used for the prison industrial complex in order to lock African American young people up by telling the country that they were hoodlums and thugs and criminals bringing drugs into the country, and they were not worthy of being treated like first-class human beings. And so I would say to you that we must keep an eye on the immigration industrial complex, because deportations are down and illegal crossings are down. People are not being deported. They are taken into sites of desolation called detention centers that have become the new prisons of the 21st century, where people are made to work for very little money, where they're being terrorized, where women are being victimized by guards. And so that people have to understand, why is it that we are now involved in this hounding, capturing, and jailing of black and brown immigrants in this country? It is for the same reason that people use to justify those actions against African American people and Native American people for many, many years. And so I hope that we will begin to weave together our common realities of being commodities for an economy that does not wish for us to survive.
And I just believe it's that cycle of information and violence that it's up to us to fix as a youth, because that's directly affecting us and will continue. That cycle will continue unless we do things. Like Sam said, we need to stop the gun violence, or else it'll become a headline.
Yeah, and I feel that a lot of people don't understand the severity of an issue because they themselves have never been in the first hand. They've never had to be behind the barrel of a gun or in front of the barrel of a gun. They've never been in an incident where their lives are put at risk. So they think that their lives are a luxury, it's a privilege, that their lives are safe because their neighborhoods are safe, or they have a good police department, or wherever they live is ideal. But I came from a very ideal neighborhood, one of the safest, schools in Broward County, one of the top rating schools in Broward County, one that is constantly year after year getting A's. But what happens? 17 children and teachers are killed right before my eyes. So that should be an indicator that you have to expect the unexpected. But it also should be an indicator that you shouldn't be bracing for the worst all the time. You should be preparing yourself so that things like this don't happen. You have to prepare yourself so that you won't have to worry about sending your kids to school, so you don't have to worry about going to your job or driving down the street. Personal safety has everything to do with public safety. If you think that because you're not being directly influenced, directly impacted by an issue, that it won't impact you at all. But that's the problem. If you continue to have indifference, if you continue to be silent and continue not to say anything, it will continue. And at worse velocities, the violence will continue and in higher rates. And why would anyone want that to happen? Why wouldn't you want to keep your country safe? Why wouldn't you want to make it so that everyone feels comfortable everywhere that they are? Why? Selfishness, greed, money, ulterior motives, political agendas, all of these very, very critical human character flaws that are circulated in our country all the time, because there is nothing more fulfilling than having something of your own and not sharing it with anyone else. And I think that if we share peace and we share conversation and we share each other's stories with one another, then we begin to understand one another more in a way that we never thought was possible. And I think one of the most important things in the issue is diversity. Someone once told me that you should make a friend who is nothing like you. Not the same religion, not the same color, not the same height, not the same sex. You get to learn more about yourself than you do about the other person by doing that. You become friends with someone who is completely opposite. You learn that there's another side of your story that you didn't realize, that your story is integrated in their stories, that you yourself have a direct impact with it, but you'll never know if you never talk to people, if you never have that conversation, if you never have just a moment to be courteous to someone, be kind to someone. If you never reach out, the opportunity of things getting better doesn't exist.
So I have one more question for our panelists, but we're going to turn to the audience for questions next. So go ahead and prepare those questions, and we have some mics circulating around, so you can just raise your hand. Did you have a comment to that, Ruby?
No, I wanted to hear their vision.
Okay. So the last question that I'll pose before we turn to the audience is, let's talk about the future. Share with us your vision of what the world will be, your community will be. What's your vision for the future?
Well, I believe in what Sam was saying in diversity, and I just believe the world could be better with unity and equality. And I actually have a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, if I could just find it real quick. And he says, "Our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the perfect present for the test of our civilization." And I believe that applies to everything. And just as she mentioned, we need to meet other people that are not like us, so we can intertwine our stories and create a quilt of our world, of our communities, and intertwine every community together so we can become a better world.
Great. Jackson?
Well, I'm a man of God, a praying man. A few years ago, I would never have pictured myself sitting here on this panel. A few years ago, I would have never thought that I would have a full-ride scholarship to go to college. A few years ago, I didn't think I would graduate. So for me to say how I would want the future to be, I really cannot speak on that, because I just pray on it, and God will help me fulfill my dreams. I will go to school. Hopefully I can have the opportunity to create these changes that I would like to see in my community with the help of God. I had a friend named Foots who told me, he said, "You cannot change the world, but you can leave a positive impact on the world." And I realized when I was a kid is when I had my epiphany that I can be whoever I want to be without the help of nobody. I just got to wake up in the morning, go get it, come back, go to sleep, and wake up again, and keep getting it. So with that being said, like I said, I visit many schools, telling the kids, inspiring them, motivating them, and empowering them to be the best that they can be, to only believe in yourself. Because with them believing in themselves, they can change not the world globally, but they can change their world. My world has been changed. I can't say the whole world has been changed, but my world has been changed. So when I say I want to grow up and change the world, if I speak to one kid and make him feel as if he's somebody, I already changed his world. So the world has changed already. And what Sam said, we need to be diverse. If we love each other, like if I don't love myself, I cannot love somebody else, you know? So once I figure out who I am, once I figure out what I am, figure out who God says I am, and love myself, I can go love somebody else. And that can make somebody else feel loved. But I can't not make a better place without me finding my place first. That's how I think we can make a better place. That's where I see myself in the future.
Before all of this, before the shooting, before I got shot, before everything, I used to see myself as an outstandingly average person. I tried everything in my power to stay under the radar. I wanted to be unnoticed. I wanted to do everything that I had to, that every adult and mentor had told me to do: go to school, finish high school, go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, die, pay your taxes, right? And I was ready to do that. I was ready to be average. I was ready to be normal. And then this happens. And everything has changed, and every idea that I've ever had has been erased. Every idea and everything that has been taught to me was changed, because I realized something very important. Your mentors, your teachers, your parents, they will motivate you to do the bare minimum. They will motivate you to do what you have to do. But they will never motivate you to go above and beyond, because they don't want their legacy to be replaced. They want their legacy to be gone when they are gone. And you can't start making a difference until you're an adult. And that's why I didn't try for so long. And that's why I didn't have the motivation to be my own person, to speak my own mind, to go places and tell people how it is, because everyone in my world, in my existence, told me that there's a standard. And here's the problem with standards. Standards lead to cycles, and cycles lead to bad habits. And this country has a horrible bad habit of teaching our kids that being average is, because it's not. I guess my point, or my theme, is that I want to change the world by changing minds. I want people to recognize their own potential. I want people to realize that the word citizen means power, that being here and existing means that you have every right, just as those people in those elected offices and the pretty fancy suits and the fancy cars. Your words mean just as much as everyone else's. And the thing about it is that maybe your one voice might not mean anything right now, but everything is a collective effort. The moment you realize your own potential and you realize your own significance, the people around you will realize it too. Why? That's the power of influence. That's the power of word of mouth. That's the power of love. And the moment that we spread that love and we spread that potential and we realize our own importance and we realize the difference and the change that we can make, regardless of who you are, because race, religion, sexuality, how tall or short you are, what color your eyes are, literally does not matter. We all bleed the same color at the end of the day. All our lives mean exactly the same at the end of the day. It's just a matter of being able to realize that your life is as significant as others, and realizing that your voice matters as much as others, and that coming together is never a bad thing. Having a conversation, having a discussion, even having a debate is not a bad thing, because communication is what brings us together. Communication is what makes our lives as people easier, because I can't exist and I can't read minds. I can't tell what he's thinking or what you're thinking or what your solutions are, because you don't voice them. And I think that the way that you can change the world is realizing that you can change the world, realizing that you are a part of that change, realizing that you are a very important aspect in the world around you, and that you're not just a bystander. You're not just, a person in the background. You're very much involved as long as you believe you are. And I think that's what's most important is the fact that people don't believe that they can change the world.
Ruby?
I'm sitting here listening to the aspirations with the ears of an elder. And several things I think I want to just deepen our thoughts about. No person is an island, and no person stands alone. And we're here today, not because we are so exceptional, but we're here today because of what someone else has done for us. It is important to get to know each other, but we're about something deeper than just getting to know each other. We're about changing power structures that demean the lives of some people while elevating and aggrandizing the lives of others. And so we're about systemic change. We're about a movement to re-alter society, to tear it down and set it right again nonviolently. Notice I said nonviolently. We are not about building up someone's career while leaving the community behind. We understand that it is in a strong community, that strong communities build strong leaders. Weak communities build weak leaders. So our obligation, our responsibility is, even as we upbuild ourselves, we understand that it is in community, not in isolation, that we know the full meaning of our power. So what is equity? It is our ability to be participants in a project to upbuild democracy, to democratize society, not to diversify, but to democratize. And so that your generation, I agree with you, standards can mean mediocrity, and I need for you to talk in non-mediocre terms. I need for you to think deeply about how is it that you're going to use your gifts, to use mine less and use we a little bit more. I think that's really important. Otherwise, we just keep on creating generations of narcissists who love their lives more than they love the lives of other people. So it is with great faith in you that I challenge you to understand that your mission is more than just getting to know someone else's story. It's getting to learn the real American story of genocide, of oppression, of militarism, and to really understand that we are part, that even gun violence is not something out there by itself. It's part of a long narrative of American violence. And what is different is that historically only black lives and brown lives carried less currency because of an economy. Now a gun economy has made white children's lives as insignificant in many ways as the lives of colored children. But all of that has a context. And so I would challenge you to really contextualize even your aspirations and to touch the hurt by simply not saying, I'm going to do this for myself, but to say, how might I do something to to make sure that people come behind me don't experience the same hurt that I've had to endure.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that is realizing that no one is where they're standing because they did it alone. I could not be here without the strength and the resilience of my community and of my family and of everything that they have provided for me, because I would not be able to come out of this alone, and no one should. And that's why, like, resources need to be provided. There needs to be people that other people who are in distress can talk to, and so that we don't have to lose another person just because they've been abandoned or because they're forgotten. We need a systematic method that keeps everybody involved, and not just a specific group, not just a marginalized group, but everybody, because everyone's lives are significant, they're important. But another thing to acknowledge is that, like, there are lives that are targeted more than others. Yeah. And you have to realize that if you are going to help everyone, that means that if someone is struggling more than someone else, then they need more help. Someone's given me this analogy, it's a phenomenal analogy, right? If one of the houses in your neighborhood is on fire, you squirt the one that's on fire, not the entire neighborhood, right? So you give the resources to the people who really need them, and then the people who don't can help other people, right?
Let's open it up to the audience, because I want to get you involved in this conversation as well. So do we have any questions for any of the panelists, for Ruby, the young leaders? I see one back there.
I see somebody.
And if you could just introduce yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Pranisha Clifton, and my question is for the young man in the middle. I know that you said that you were the first in your family, to go past 10th grade. How did you get that buy-in or support from those around you when that wasn't a lifestyle that they knew to proceed on past? And what support systems did you rely on, like, say, from your school or from your community to help you convince those around you that that path was good?
Thank you. That was a great question. I didn't have the support at home. So I had to rely on school. And not just school, but other extracurricular activities that I know that if I stayed in, I would not fall victim to the streets and be another statistic like everyone else. I believe that I can change that, and by believing in myself. Once I started to play football, I realized that the coaches, they became my father. The reason why they were my father, because I had to say yes, sir, to the coaches, or else I would run laps, In school, I have my teacher, Miss Lulis, who's like my mother, because she helps me get through anything that I have troubles with. If I need to pass a test, I go to a classroom, and we stay there till about 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. at night. She helps us with essays, helped me write resumes so I could get a job. So in school, I found a family, friends, people that I love. Not just that, but in my community, we all believe in, we all hate cops because they keep arresting us, And I grew to that stereotype as well. But then I joined the Criminal Justice Academy. Reluctantly. I didn't want to stay, but there was this pretty girl who sat right next to me. I stayed. And me staying in there really changed. Really changed my life, because I realized that those officers who were my instructors, they were humans too. And not only were they humans, but they loved me. And they taught me discipline, respect, how to be in a family. They took me out. They made sure that if I needed somebody, I can call on them, and they will be there to help and protect me, And not only that, but I'm a lieutenant in the academy. Because I'm a lieutenant, I go home with my uniform on, with my ranks and epaulets on my shoulders. And other kids are saying, "Man, Jackson, you in a police academy?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they say, "You're a successful person. I want to be just like you. How can I join the academy?" Now they're not thinking that cops are bad anymore. So I already broke that cycle. I have a little cousin at home who, his father, he's in jail, in and out. He drinks a lot, like alcohol, and he dropped out. And I take my little cousin everywhere I go, even to school. So my teacher, Miss Lewis, can tutor him you know, and so that he can know that he doesn't have to be like his father. And I know that he looks up to me because I took him to one of my events, and the lady asked him, you know, where's your dad? Take me to your dad. And he said, my dad's there, and then he came to me. So now I'm like, got this little kid who thinks I'm his dad when really I'm his cousin. So he looks up to me. And if I let him down, if I don't break that cycle, it's just gonna continue on to him. Because he sees how bright I am, and I don't slip up, so he slips up, he can have a future, you know? And I hope I answered your question correctly. If I have to, I don't know. Yeah.
There's a question over there.
Hi, I have a question for the young lady on my left, who is a DACA recipient. I'm just a little bit interested in knowing more about how your community supported you and helped you in dealing with living in the shadows, which we know a lot of immigrant and refugee communities experience. So I would like to hear a little bit more about how the different people in your life, in your family, supported you through that process. Especially, and I was wondering, when you realized that you needed DACA, because a lot of kids don't know that they need DACA until they go get their driver's license and they realize that they don't have a social security number. So I just would like to know more about your story.
All right. Well, a lot of people don't know what DACA stands for, and it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it's given to us whose parents came into this country, but we were born in another country, so we do not have that social security. And my family, I come from a family we're all Mexican, and so I feel like the social security really came into play when I needed to get my learner's permit, and I wasn't able to. My friends were all getting their learner's permit, they were all studying, they were all taking courses, and I went in one day after school to take the driver's ed course, and the first thing they said is, all right, so you're gonna need to get your social security to be able to log in the computer and start the course. And so unfortunately, I had to get out of the room and just leave quietly without the teacher seeing me because I wasn't able to complete that course. And I feel like I really got a lot of support from my friends. And John I. Leonard is a very Latino school. The majority of us are Latinos, and the minority there are Caucasians. And so I believe I got a lot of support from my family because I knew I was going to have my quince, and then a few days after, I would have to submit all my forms, get all my achievements, everything with dates from when I came in to now so I can apply to the DACA. And so I had to get all my honor roll papers and everything together just to send it in because I knew I wasn't able to do a lot of things with the Social Security, without a Social Security. And also scholarships, that has also been affected because now that I'm a sophomore and I'm going to be a junior next year looking into scholarships, I'm not able to apply for many of them because they require citizenship and that Social Security. And the Social Security we have is for work permit. Yeah, work permit only. So we're not allowed to use that to get the scholarships. We are only limited to the scholarships that are for DACA recipients and non-citizens, which are mostly private. And so I feel like that has been a struggle, and that's when I've really started to notice. But before then, it was just, I've been fortunate enough not to have experienced bullying or anything. We've all, just from middle school, my middle school has also been very Hispanic and Latino, so we've all just gotten together. I was part of the ISA, International Spanish Academy, in middle school. So I was able to be around other Hispanics, and we would just all communicate with our cultures and compare cultures and talk in Spanish and be together. And so I feel like that it came into play coming into high school as getting older and things that require Social Security. And that's what I've noticed what DACA is and why they're trying to take it away and how that affects people behind me, because some of my friends that are younger that came into this country, they're not able to receive that. They're not able to get their permit as I've been able to get my permit. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you everyone on the stage for being here. This is really inspiring and amazing to see the intergenerational conversation happening right in front of us, so thank you. My question is for the young people on the stage. So this is a convening of 700 plus adults who are working to serve young people in our country. Many of us do not work in direct service with the young people. So my question to you is, what do you want or need us to know about creating spaces for young people to thrive?
Want to take at it?
Here's a big tip: social media. We are the hugest consumer of social media. We literally come together and talk to each other on Twitter and on Instagram and on Tumblr and on Facebook and on all these things. If you look online, you'll see all of these youth-based organizations with platforms and representatives that you can speak to. I myself, representative of March for Our Lives. If you want to talk to me about it, you can talk to me. And if you are curious about how you can open centers and safe places for teens and for young adults so that they have a place to go to, if you want to do it locally, then you're gonna have to speak to your local authorities in regards to like opening a center. So talk to like your congressman, talk to your senators, talk to your mayor, talk to your governor. These are all people who have contact with local organizations and local programs that can open up facilities like and non-for-profits. Some of them, some great ones are the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. Like these are programs that have existed but have a price tag. So if you want to get more involved in opening these safe places, then you're going to have to talk to your like local community and the people who are locally in charge. Unless you want to start your own organization, that's cool too.
I agree with that. I agree with you.
Also, maybe add another layer to that question. If you could talk about some of the spaces that you go to, and what about those spaces makes it a place that you want to be in? What about the environment or the people who are there? What characteristics do the adults who are in that space have that make you feel like that is a safe and healthy space for you to be in? Or Jackson?
Yeah, go ahead, Jackson. I was talking.
Jackson.
Interrupt you.
I am ambassador, state representative of Be Strong, which is a anti-bullying program that gives people resources that they don't have, you know. And in there, you connect with others, you know, globally, and then you just, it's like a loving place to be. You know, knowing that someone else is going through the same thing you're going through, and we're just trying to achieve whatever that we need together. I am the Teen Advisory Council at the Milagro Teen Center, where teens come in after school and we talk, we mentor, we do homework together. You know, before I was there, the teens, they were afraid to show the report cards to Mr. Anthony, which is like the director there. You know, then I was like, no, man, believe in yourself. If you know your report card is low, own up to it, be accountable to that, and try to rise it. If you need my help, I'm here to help you. Mr. Anthony's here to help you. Everyone else here we're here to help each other. Yeah. So as soon as we come from after school, we're gonna help each other. We're gonna do our homework, you know, study. And now they come back and they don't even have to wait for us to say, where's your report card? They're running through the door, give them the report card, and their GPA rise. You know, places like these a tip for adults is to believe in the kids. There's some adults who just, okay, this kid's a bad student, he's disrespectful, I don't want to have nothing to do with him, and just throw him out. I was that kid, you know. But look at me now, because of somebody who said, I believe in you. You know? Believe in the kids. Have faith in them. We are the future. Believe in us.
Also, yeah, there is a huge lack of safe spaces for young adults and teenagers. if you're confused by that, it's because we are putting money into other priorities. And if you want to make a difference in that, then, and you see that it's lacking in your community, be the start to change. Be, being a representative, be an organization leader. If there is no kind of committee or no program in your local community, then make it. Because if you're so concerned about your world changing, then you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think that's important, because I've noticed in my community, we lack a safe space for our kids. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's all the money they're putting into City Hall, but so if you see that there's something lacking in your community, something that is critically missing, something, like an essential aspect that would benefit everybody, then be the one to start it. If you don't want to do it alone, connect with other like-minded adults, or connect with unlike adults. Connect with someone, be the start. If you're concerned about there being a lack or a scarcity of programs and safe spaces, then create a safe space. And that just starts with looking out and opening your eyes, keeping your ears open, because if your kids don't have a safe place to go after school besides their house, that should be an indicator that they need another place to go, because life is not just school and home. There's much more to it, and there's extracurriculars involved. And a kid will blossom, and a kid will succeed more when they're motivated by things that propel them forwards, such as whether it be arts or whether it be sports or just talking to one another. That is the very roots of what makes people successful, is providing them a safe place and providing them a place where they can console other people, or they themselves can be consoled. Because if you don't have an area like that where you can coexist, then you'll never feel safe.
All right, let's take one more question.
Hi.
Oh.
I'm over here. I'm 4'11". So I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah, just come on stage with us.
Yeah. This is going to be a good one, I know it.
With my heels. This is for Ms. Sales, and I'm hoping that you can help me with this. My question is, I am struggling with this notion of embracing the narrative of people missing and that being okay. There's a narrative that says, if I come from a single home, poor home, broken home, then this happens, then this is who I am. And my mother came from a poor home, but there was pride in that. She stood in that. So how do we, as we go through building this movement of healing and being spiritual, how do we own that people have all these different experiences, some good, some bad, but they're valued, and we can own that our family might appear in a way that society doesn't say is okay, but understand there's value and power in that, so that we don't have to disconnect our narrative from them in order to exist. Because what I hear is brokenness, and I think that brokenness keeps us hindered and small. And so can you just speak into that, please, so we can stand people up with power to own what their narrative and what their journey is, and to value every single person in their lives, whether they show up the way society says is okay or not. Parents can exist without being the parents that people think they should be. How do you do that?
First of all, you took the words out of my mouth. I think to describe people as absolute brokenness, broken, is to reduce them to nothingness. I think that we have to teach people to celebrate the victories as well as navigating the defeats, and to be able to identify what those victories have been. In each community, there are victories. Poor people have had incredible victories Just because you're materially poor, it doesn't mean that you've done nothing essential in life. You're only unessential if people think that money is the essence of all human beings. And so we've got to stop talking about people in terms that render them deficient or insignificant or broken or so traumatized that yes, there's been trauma in all of our lives. Even Jewish people have been traumatized by the Holocaust. Native American people have been traumatized by genocide and all the things that have happened to them. No one group is so wholly traumatized that they are incapable of moving. And I think that it is a very racist description to talk about black people and brown people as being wholly without any redemptive features, and to tell young folks that because they had challenges in their families, because they might have been without economic resources, that they are less than the person who might have come from a family that had more resources, but whose families were broken in many, many ways that never gets talked about. And so I think that we've got to really change our narrative in terms of how we talk with people about the significance of their lives, and to stop telling people that they came from broken and deficient families. Something obviously had to work or they wouldn't be sitting with us today. So let's try to figure out the things that worked as well as the things that didn't work. So I think we have to really expand our understanding of this. In the African American community, we develop strong cultural resources of survival. And it's important for new generations to understand that they don't start from ground zero, that these things still exist, and what is useful they can use, but they also have the option of throwing away that which is not useful and creating some more. But they are not without any resources to stand on. Latinas have resources to stand on. So stop saying to young people that just because they might have less money than someone else, that they come from a cultural deprivation. I think that materialism is a cultural deprivation that dehumanizes us and really eradicates our ability to be fully human. So we need to really begin to develop a new way of understanding who people are who come under our tutelage, so that we are not reinforcing in them the very stereotypes that society say about who they are.
We are at time, and I think that is a beautiful way to end this conversation. Can you all join me in thanking Ruby, Marlene, Jackson, and Sam?